Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're having a great day so far and welcome to today's video, which is going to be a new episode of Makeup Dilemmas. This is where I invite you to send me your makeup dilemmas, your makeup struggles, your issues, or a question you have for me about makeup. I do always try to answer lots of comments on each of my videos, but I can't always get to all of the questions, and I know you guys sometimes want my opinion on things or want me to answer a question or help you with your makeup. So this is your opportunity. I always post a sticker on my Instagram stories, and that's how you can have your question answered in one of these videos. If you asked a question that has been answered in a previous episode, I typically won't answer it because I always think it's the most helpful to answer like the new questions that I haven't answered before, I haven't seen before, because no one is ever the only person with these questions. They're always people who have the same issues and the same problems as us. Like, we're never the only ones. So this is why I think it's really great to answer these questions in a video so that we can all learn from each other. That's the beauty of our community here. So without further ado, let's get started. So the first question from Astrid is, which is the best long-lasting cream blush? I feel like this is not a question for me. If you are new here, I am not a cream blush fan. I do not use cream or liquid blushes, rarely at all, unless I'm trying to force myself to, because I'm just not, I'm a powder girl. I'm not a cream type of person. I just don't use them, don't have many. One of my makeup resolutions for this year was to try more cream products. So hopefully I can start to help answer some of these questions, because I know that it's important for me to try new things and to try and find products that I like that I didn't necessarily think that I would, and help you guys learn along with me. But I'm not the best person to answer this question because I just don't try very many of them. The one that kind of springs to mind would be the Lisa Eldridge, which is, I guess, is it a cream? I think so. Or is it a liquid blush? I'm not sure what the difference is. That's how little I know about cream and liquid blush. Please let us know in the comment section if you are a cream expert, a pro with the creams, you've tried lots of formulas, hit us up in the comment section down below. I'm still definitely learning and finding out about creams, but I know a lot of you love them, so let's answer this question in the comment section down below. Next up, Shazia asked, how can I stop my under eye concealer settling into my wrinkles? So I actually have a whole video, because I have a lot of I actually have a whole video on this. I will put it in the cards somewhere or link it in the description box down below, because this is a whole video. This is a whole shebang. I have lots of different tips and tricks and things that I've just learned over the years that help me keep my concealer without creasing, without settling in. But there are definitely levels of concealer. So there are concealers that will settle into your lines probably whatever you do, and there are concealers that will do it less. So techniques and tips and tricks, check out that video that I mentioned. But yeah, trial and error with finding a great concealer that works for you. Iris asked me to swatch the Victoria Beckham bronzers that I have in shades 3 and 4. So let's do that. I like it when you guys ask me for swatch comparisons. This is something that I try to do, especially with newer products on my Instagram. So if there's something new that you know that I have and you're like, oh, is this like this one? Is this similar to that shade? Please let me know. I'm always happy if I am home and have the time and I have the product to help you guys out with comparison swatches. So this is shade 3 and this is shade 4. You'll notice that shade 4 obviously is richer and deeper, but it's much more red, whereas shade 3 is much more of like a classic warm tone. Hope that helps. Next up, Sophie asked, how do you use concealer and corrector together the right way? So the short answer is I don't really use corrector at all, very rarely. I've tried a few just for review purposes or to see what I think, but my personal feeling is that for my under eye situation, I don't need a corrector and a concealer, and the least amount of product in my under eye area, the better, because the more product, the more it's going to aid you in your under eye area. Less is more is more. Less is less is less is less is more. as we get older. So for me, I use the smallest amount of concealer that I can that will cover that area, and I use the best concealer I've ever found for covering everything while keeping my under eye area lighter and just more natural. So that is, as you know, my favourite is the McGrath Concealer. I'm sure you guys know that is my holy grail, bar none. But on the rare occasions I have tried colour correctors, so for example, one that I tried is the Nars colour corrector. What I did with that I found worked very, very nicely is I just used the tiniest amount only in the inner corners where I have that discoloration that has that like that purple blue sort of discoloration in the corners of my eye, just a tiny bit. You're not trying to get rid of it completely, you're just trying to tone it down, and then the concealer will do the rest. So the smallest amount, give it a few minutes to sink into the skin, to set down, and then over the top with concealer. That's what I did. It worked very, very nicely with that corrector. So that would be my advice, is the smallest amount of corrector, allow it to sink in and get into the skin, and then go in with concealer once it's dried down, because otherwise you're going to kind of mix the two together if you don't give the corrector enough time to kind of work its way into the skin and dry down. Next up, the wonderful Bron asked, what I'm struggling with at the moment is getting the outer V depth right in eye look. So I'm not sure what like your eye shape and situation is, Bron, but I will tell you what I do and how I kind of do my outer V and get the depth. Oh my God, how I like it. So first up, I will say what will help you is finding the right brush for this job. The brush that I kind of go for when I'm doing my outer V is the Rephr 01 brush. The reason I like this one is it's quite flat and narrow, and it's quite light and airy. I'll show you in comparison to the 16, which is kind of a more classic like blending brush. So here is the 16, the big fluffy one, and then the 01 next to it. You can see how much smaller it is. And it's also, if I turn it on its side, much more narrow and just closer together with the bristles. Less of a splayed out big fluffy brush. It's much, much more precise. So for me, because I have hooded eyes, I have a sort of smaller area to work with, and I want to be more careful. So using a brush like this, it just helps me get in and stay where I need it to go. And it's not so fluffy that it blends everywhere, but it's also not really dense and is going to pack too much colour, especially if you're trying to be careful and not go over the top or you have issues with blending. So that would be my advice, is to get something like this 01 that is sort of more packed but not in a dense way. It's a fluffier but smaller, narrower brush. And how I kind of do that outer V area is I almost like stamp it flatly and I follow the shape of my lower lash line. Let me zoom in. This is useless, isn't it? So this is the angle that I want to follow my lower lash line. So I will kind of stamp the product here on the lower part of my lash line, kind of following that angle outwards, and then I blend it up following the angle of like my natural crease. That's how I do that outer V. So I'll start off placing the deeper shadow in the kind of shape of that lower lash line, and I'll go in a downward motion. I'll just place it there, and then I will blend it up and out and then follow my natural crease. With this Didier brush, it just helps me keep it where I want it, and it builds it up but in a slow, manageable way. So I hope that helps you somewhat. Next up from Nikki, she asked, do you pay attention to the expiry date on makeup? Not in the slightest. What I pay attention to is texture, smell, and look of products. Products will tell you when they're expired. I'm not going to throw makeup away based on a date that someone put on it. What I notice when makeup products are expiring and I no longer want to use them is anything like separation. If they start to take on a strange smell, or the texture changes, or they just stop performing, they dry out, maybe you get a load of hard pan, that for me is when like a product is worth binning. I'm not going to throw away perfectly good makeup based on expiry dates. I barely throw away food that's expired. I don't give it to my children, just so you know. You know what they say, if you're not living on the edge, you're taking up too much room. I mean, everyone should do what they think is right. I'm not telling you to do what I do. The question was, what do I do? Do I pay attention to it? And the answer is no. I don't think I've even ever looked at what the expiry date says. And that's even if I could remember how old the product is, because they don't give you a date like food. It will just say 24 months, and you're making a bold assumption that I can remember how long I've had it. But yeah, I don't pay attention to them. I do pay attention to changes that I notice, if the consistency, if there's something like a foundation starts to separate or it just starts to look funky, then it goes in the bin. But I won't be told when my makeup is going in the bin. I will decide that. Next up, Wax Munska asked, which foundations do you find most transfer proof when wearing a mask a lot? So there are two that are my go-tos if I'm going to have a mask on a lot, or on and off with a mask, and it's going to be, you know, transfer is a concern. The Tom Ford Soft Matte, that is one that, regardless mask or not, wears very nicely and doesn't transfer a lot, that I really think is a great long wearing, fade resistant, transfer proof foundation. The other one is the Lisa Eldridge. This is probably my favorite not luminous foundation. I think it's very, very beautiful, very natural, wears very well, and it does set, it's self-setting, so very, very good with masks. So those are kind of the two that I would recommend for mask life. Trinalyn asks, how do you get the Pat McGrath Concealer to work? Do I use a cream? It looks so bad on me, really cakey. So there's a lot to consider here. Yes, I do. I use an eye cream every single day of my whole life. I have used, the eye cream I'm using at the moment is the Mizone Snail Repair eye cream, but that's kind of irrelevant, because I'd say at this point, I've been using the Pat McGrath Concealer so long, I've probably used it with maybe 6 or 7 different eye creams. I've never had that issue. It's never ever looked cakey or heavy on me at all, regardless of which eye cream I've used that day. So I don't think that's what's happening here. There's a few possibilities. One, skincare certainly does make a difference. 2, skin type and just under eye area. You know, if you had a totally different under eye situation from me, much younger, much older, or just a different aging situation in your under eyes, or a different skin type with your under eyes, we're going to have a different result with the same product. It's also going to make a different result what if you use a primer under there, if you use a different eye cream under there, if you use eye cream in a different way, a different amount, and also a big difference will be made by the powder that you set with. I use the Pat McGrath powder to set with. It could be the powder that you're using is cakey and not the concealer, or they just don't work well together. It could also be that you're not leaving enough time between skincare and concealer, but the most likely thing that it could be is that the product just doesn't work for you in the same way it does for me, and that's the really important thing to learn. But because something is my holy grail and I love it and it's amazing and it's my favorite product, definitely doesn't guarantee it's going to be yours. It's going to work the same way for you that it does for me. We have completely different skin types. We have a lot of different concerns. We also have different preferences and things like that. So there are a lot of different variables between me and the next person as to how a product's going to work. So that's the really important thing to understand. It could be that that concealer just doesn't work for you. There's a few things to try: switching your eye cream, leaving longer between skincare and concealer, trying a different powder. But ultimately, I don't think we should have to try to make our products work. I don't have to do anything to that concealer. I use a small amount. I find it very, very quick and easy. I don't do anything special. If I did have to do something special, it wouldn't be my holy grail. My products need to work easily and be simple and uncomplicated. And we shouldn't have to make our products work for us. They should do the work. That's why we pay money for them. We shouldn't have to make them work. Ultimately, if it's work, it's not working. That's what I would say. So it may just be that that concealer doesn't work for you, and that's annoying. I understand it's sad, especially if I love something, I think it's amazing, and you were hoping to have the same result and it just doesn't work in the same way, and that's really frustrating. But that is makeup, which is the annoying thing about makeup. It works so differently for every one of us, and it was possibly that concealer just doesn't work for you and your skin type or your concerns, etc. So yeah, there's a few things you could try, but ultimately just sounds like it's not one that works as well for you as it does me. Anu says she doesn't wear foundation. She has oily skin and is pregnant. Which should I start with? The Charlotte Tilbury, Nars, etc. Something lightweight. So for me, if you don't wear foundation, you've never worn foundation, I wouldn't jump straight into like a full-on foundation. I would probably go with moisturiser, tinted moisturiser, skin tint, something like that, because going from like nothing, bare skin to a foundation might be a bit of a shock. You might not like it. So I would go with something quite thin, consistency, lightweight, very comfortable and breathable to wear, and just see how you get on. And then if you get the bug, you could always go for more coverage or whatever you're looking for. A couple of my favourite tinted moisturisers that I think will work really nicely for you. First is the Laura Mercier. This is the oil-free tinted moisturiser, because you said you had oilier skin. So this isn't quite as glowy and as luminous as a lot of the ones that I like, but it is a nice, natural, very, very good tinted moisturiser. That might be one to try. Another one, if you like a bit more luminosity and even less coverage, would be the Shiseido Synchro Skin Self-Refreshing. This is definitely a skin tint. Hardly any coverage, but very good at like evening skin out, getting rid of discoloration, redness, and just giving you a gorgeous glow to the skin. It's very natural, light, and seamless. Definitely doesn't look like makeup-y or foundation-y, and it feels lovely and refreshing on the skin. So those are kind of my two picks for something very light, very natural, very easy as a kind of first step into wearing a base. Those would be my starting point. Bio Girl asks, how can I find my correct undertone and shade in a foundation? So again, I have a whole video on how to find what your undertones are. That is number one, very, very important. I would rather match my undertone than my depth, if you understand me. So I would much rather have a correct, perfect undertone that maybe is too light or too dark than have the right depth and it be completely off undertone wise, because I think that looks worse. So for me, undertone is key. Check out my video on how to find all the different ways to find your undertone. Once you have your undertone, you're there, really. Most foundations, especially if you go to the brand's website, they will have a description that will of each shade that will give you a category. So that could be fair, light, medium, tan, deep, etc. And then it will have an undertone, which is typically, I mean, the most basic, it will be warm, neutral, cool, but they also throw in neutral warm or olive tones, or then different types of warm. So whether it's warm peach or it's warm yellow or warm orange or red, there are lots. It gets more and more complicated. But once you know your undertone, then checking your depth is much easier. You can also get matched in store if you go to a counter. Not completely foolproof. Definitely look outside in natural daylight before putting any money down on the shade they told you definitely are. But once you have a match in your foundation, you know that shade is definitely a good match for you. Use something like Foundation, which is an online comparison shade finder for foundation. So you put in a shade that you know works for you, and it will tell you your shade in other foundations. And I found it decently accurate. If nothing else, it will give you a very good starting point. But I would recommend checking out my video for how to find your shade online and how to know what undertone you are, because that's really the best place to start. Find out your undertone, try lots of foundations, have it matched to you in store, and once you find a good match, you then have that to work from with everything else. Jenny asked, how do you get liquid foundation to not pill? This has happened with every one I've tried. So this is interesting. Let's just say, for a start, foundations should not be pilling. That shouldn't happen at all. That's like something is going wrong here. Okay, something's going wrong, but that's fine. We're here to help. That's why we're here. So if you were telling me that a specific foundation was pilling on you, then it may be that that foundation is a bad foundation, a useless foundation. But the fact that you're saying it happens with every foundation you've tried leads me to believe something else is going on here. And the likely culprits, without launching an investigation and having a look at exactly what you're doing, the most likely culprits here are your skincare or your primer is fighting with your foundation. So there's a few things here, depending on the foundation that you're using, which primer are you using? If you're using a primer, if you're not using a primer, then the most likely culprit is your skincare. So it could be that you're using an SPF that is fighting with your foundation and causing it to peel, having a reaction. It could be that you're mixing different bases, so an oil-based foundation with a different base of primer or skincare, and that can create pilling. A few things to try. So one, having a look into the base of your foundation. Is it water-based foundation, silicone-based, oil-based? And then what is the primer that you're using? If you're not using a primer, then you might need to make a bigger gap between skincare and foundation application, or just have a look at the skincare you're using. Moisturiser. I had a big issue with the moisturiser I was using, made my primer pill. So that was just sitting on the surface of my skin. It obviously wasn't absorbing really nicely into the skin. And therefore, when I applied my primer, it was like mixing together with the moisturiser, and that was creating the pilling. So what the pilling is it sounds like it's your foundation mixing with something that is creating that pilling effect. So it's either skincare, not enough time between doing your skincare and your foundation, leave at least 10 or 15 minutes if possible between skincare and foundation. If you are using a primer, again, it needs a good few minutes between primer and foundation. You've got to let that primer work its way into the skin. I typically will put my primer on and then do my eyes and then go in foundation, and that's long enough. I'm not sitting there waiting for it to go in, but that's long enough of a gap between primer and foundation. Same thing with skincare. As soon as I wake up in the morning, I do my skincare. Then I get up, brush my teeth, do my hair, get dressed, have breakfast, and then do my makeup. And again, so I'm not wasting time, I'm not sitting waiting, but I am kind of giving a gap between skincare. If it's the same SPF or skincare or moisturiser or something that you've been using, and it's happening with each of these foundations, moisturiser could definitely be the culprit. You need one that's working into the skin more effectively than one that's sitting on top and just waiting to mix with whatever you put next. That's what was happening to me with my primer. So those are a few things to play around with, because as it's happening to lots of your foundations, there's something else going on. It's not that all of these foundations are terrible. It's nothing wrong with you, your skin, or what you're doing or how you're applying. There's something that's reacting with the foundation. So you just need to find what that is. Shelley asked how best to apply upper eyeliner. I'm dreadful at it. So I don't know if you mean waterline liner or if you're talking about like liquid liner or like winged liner. I'm not sure exactly what upper liner you mean, but if you're talking about waterline liner, I find the best way is to close my eye and just run the pencil between my lashes, basically, is the best way for me. I don't have sensitive eyes, so don't get a lot of wateriness from them, but it's very hard to be precise in that area for me. So that's why I just find it's really quick to just close my eye and run the liner between my lashes. When it comes to liquid liner, winged liner, if that's what you're referring to, practice is everything. I could never ever do that. Ever wing liner, and now I'm confident doing my wing liner. I like the way it looks. The only thing that happened is I practiced. I stopped being scared of it, because that was the thing. I wasn't doing it because I knew I was going to get it wrong and I was scared of it. So just practice on those days where it doesn't matter. You're not leaving the house. You've got time to fix it or to take it off. Worst case scenario. Practice. I watched a lot of tutorials, but the thing that made the most difference for me was just giving it a go more often and just practicing. And I just got more and more confident and more comfortable, and learned the little tricks and tips that worked for me and my eye shape and my like skin as well, because that makes a big difference. I see people being like doing it like one-handed in 3 seconds. If I did that, it would be everywhere. I have to hold my skin because my eyes are just up there flapping about otherwise. So there you have it. That is all of the questions I have time for today. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it helpful, and I'd love to see you in the next one. Otherwise, take care for now. Bye.